Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eaterberg, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Radha Mehta, who co-directed the short film Witness with Saif Jaan. Before I jump into the interview, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast player so you can get all the newest episodes as soon as they are released. If you like the interview and want to hear more, please consider leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Radha Mehta is a director and writer with an MFA in directing from the American Film Institute who brings emotional nuance and a precise visual language to each and every project. Her award-winning work spans narrative and documentary, with recent titles including Dosh, Winds of Silence, Suna, Standing with Moms, Being Gina, and Evan Ever After. She joins me on the podcast to talk about the short film Witness, which she co-directed with Saif Jaan, and will be making its European premiere at the 2025 Raindance Film Festival. Radha, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So your film Witness tackles some really deep topics in a very short runtime, and even though it's set in the world of a small-town Muslim community, I think it's something that can resonate beyond that sphere. How important was it to use something that you were familiar with in your own experience, but also make it universal in some sense?
Yeah, so the way I came onto this project, this original story was written by Saif Jaan, and it's based on his own personal experience as a trans man that prays in a Muslim place of worship. And after his sister had had a nikah, which is a wedding ceremony, he actually snuck into the men's section and prostrated with the men, and he felt like a true sense of belonging. And he wondered sometimes, as an immigrant coming into the US, he wondered sometimes that do I have to choose to either be trans or be Muslim? Why do I have to choose from the two? So part of, his actual own lived experience and then a potential reimagining is what has created this story. And I was so particularly drawn to it because I know what it feels like to be othered and to feel unsafe in certain places that are meant to feel incredibly safe. And so when we both came together, we had decided that we wanted to have this story told from the perspective of the Imam, who is not, not queer or trans himself, but has to understand how important it is for acceptance, especially of the queer community within a place of worship, and hopefully let that be a place where we can open conversation, not only within the Muslim community but beyond, just on the topic of acceptance.
Yeah, definitely. And I myself personally am not someone who's super familiar with the details of Islam. And I really appreciated getting kind of a behind the curtain look at the mosque that you have in the film. Was that a working mosque and that you filmed in? And if so, how did that kind of impact the production itself?
Yeah, so it's very much a working mosque, and we were very fortunate that one of our principal members practices at that mosque. However, I did want to say that we had reached out to many mosques for this project, and we had been rejected by all of them. And when the opportunity for this mosque came about, we had been very transparent and shared the story with them. And their response was that we understand the need for stories like this and we support that. But please recognize that we cannot have our mosque listed anywhere within the film itself and also within the credits. But we respect your story and we give you the space for however long you need to be able to tell this story. So out of respect, we can never disclose, we signed NDAs to never disclose where that location was, but we're very grateful to that imam who actually the imam of the story was inspired by that specific imam in terms of how open he is to the conversation, but recognizes that there's still a very long way to go.
Yeah, I kind of wondered if there was multiple choices there, multiple things that you tried to reach out to, and
Oh, definitely. Yeah. To be fair, we were ready to, at one point, pivot to creating our own, like, homegrown mosque. You know how sometimes in a community center, we have to do, like, a makeshift situation, and hence the
yeah,
small town, right? And that just required so much more production design, especially in the ablution room, like, how do you do the water and everything like that? So, thankfully, we finally found one taker, and it just ended up being the biggest blessing, in every way, because for me, as a filmmaker, I love places of worship and, you just get a sense of the grandness of the gorgeousness of this, specifically in this story, the Muslim culture within this space that most people congregate. And it was really nice to capture that in its true form.
yeah. And speaking of that space, I noticed throughout the film there's lots of beautiful uses of light and shadow. You've got kind of, sunlight coming into that prayer space in some of the scenes. And then contrast that with a scene early on where the imam's in the back kitchen and you've got much harsher lighting there. What was tell me a little bit about how you used those various spaces to kind of create different aspects of the film?
Yeah, and thank you for noticing that. So our DP, Nausheen Dadabhoy, she's Muslim herself, and she had done this incredible Tribeca award-winning documentary called Acts of Worship that she had directed and DP'd herself. And that is where she had like gone to many places of Muslim, Muslim places of worship. So she already had that inbuilt experience of how light works in these spaces. And so when we brought her in here, I think the intention that the directors like both Saif and I had along with her is that we want to be able to show contrast and somehow reflect in the imam's journey because there's a moment of joy in the way he like talks to his people, but then when he has conflict there's a sense of like despair and feeling like all is lost. And so we wanted to be able to reflect that with the lights and shadows but not let the cinematography distract from the story itself. So I hope that that's what ended up coming through. And the other important thing is costume design was very important in terms of the color choices we had on these people. So you see a lot of solid colors, and they're all in the bold, like the greens. It's not pastel green, but it's like bold green or bold red. And those colors actually amplify the contrast in the lights and shadows as well.
Yeah, I love some of the costuming as well. And again, that's things that I've seen before, but nothing that I'm super familiar with in terms
Yeah.
of this particular culture. I know you have some amazing actors who are dressed in those beautiful costumes as well, especially Farhan Tahir, who plays the Imam. Told me a little bit about the process of finding the various actors to bring these characters to life.
We were really grateful to have this casting director named Kirtana Sastry to help our project. And when she had reached out, she said that, "Okay, what's your wish list of the imam?" And I said, "Well, if I gave you my wish list, there's no way I could get someone like, Farhan Tahir." And she goes, "Try me." And so then sure enough, she had us be introduced to Farhan Tahir. And I don't know if you know of him, but he is part of the Marvel universe in Iron Man. And he
I
was
did see that. Yeah.
yeah, and he's the very first person to ever speak Urdu, like, in the Marvel universe, which was, like,
Right.
such a big deal to South Asians, and he just had this very, like, regal look to him, the way his hair is, the way his beard is, and it was just like he was a very, warm soul. And so when we had the chance to meet him, he was getting to know us and getting to know our story. I didn't realize that the reason for that call is he had already decided to be on this project, and so we're talking to him, we're jamming, we're having a good time. And at the end, I was like, "So, Farhan, like, will you please be in our project?" He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm already on this project. I just wanted to get to know you guys." And we were so happy. But yeah, he was truly amazing. And then Sean Dasani is someone that had his own like spiritual path and a spiritual awakening after becoming trans. And it was important that that specific role was casted authentically. And so he brought his own experiences into that specific role for Shams. And then the other, like Nema, who played the daughter, she is like a multilinguist, so she speaks many different languages, and the way she was able to tap into speaking Urdu was just it blew us away, and being able to tap into certain emotions between the father-daughter conversation that has which, really serves as the true message of this story. It was just we were really blessed with how we were able to get the casting together.
Yeah, I thought that conversation between the father and the daughter was obviously, just like you said, it's a very pivotal moment in the film. I thought it was very well done between the two of them.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So there's also some beautiful music present throughout the film. It's never really overpowering, but really helps to support what's going on in various scenes. How important was it to pick the right sound to accompany the film and help contribute to that mood?
So music is something that's very important to me, like as a filmmaker. I usually start with music before I go into shot listing and all that. Like I kind of have a playlist in my mind. However, for this project, because it was the first project that I had co-directed, I wanted to try a version in which we had absolute silence, like throughout the editing process. Never put any kind of temp music or anything like that, and see how the story holds on its own. And then afterwards, we realized, okay, now we got the story to a place, we picture locked to a place where we feel like, okay, the story completely holds on its own, that if it were to be silent, that it would still be okay. But given how much I love music and then Saif also loves music, we created like a small playlist for ourselves of different songs we like that had like these Arabic influences as well as like South Asian influences, both Indian and Pakistani, because they're from the same base. And so then what I did afterwards, what I typically do on other films is I start with music. In this case, I then tempt the whole film with certain songs that I liked. And then he was completely on board. And then we got connected with Omar El-Deeb, who is Egyptian, and he's a multi-instrumentalist. And so once he heard the score, he was like, I could totally do this and elevate it. And he did that. And we were just very careful to make sure that the music doesn't overpower, that it was just more to serve in certain moments of ambiance to help kind of like amplify the emotions there, but not like jam it down our throats.
Yeah, I thought it did a really good job of that.
Thank you.
Well, I have a couple of questions not specifically related to the film, but before I move on, is there anything else you want to touch on about Witness?
Yeah, so, Saif is not on this call, but he knows I very much represent him in a lot of ways. And, it takes immense bravery for being able to tell this story. And we have so much respect for him. And it's not easy to be able to speak out, like, for this call, for instance, just to even have this interview with you. And so it's important that, I think our hope is that this obviously does open conversations, and because of the perspective of the imam, that perhaps the non-queer community can then relate to why they should take care of their own, irrespective of what gender, irrespective of what, creed that they have. And so, I just wanted to comment that, there's a lot of bravery there that, from Safe, and which is why I'm so drawn to wanting to really lift the story. And I just hope that more and more people kind of follow those footsteps to be able to like create a place of acceptance within, specifically within Muslim places of worship.
Well, baby steps for letting them film in one of those places, and hopefully that begins to open some more doors down the road.
Yes.
Well, this might be the hardest question I ask, but if you had to pick your top three films of all time, what would they be?
Yeah, so I'm actually a huge fan of Iranian filmmakers. I'm really inspired by Oscar Fahrabi, and he's had some great films, including About Ellie, which is one of my favorites, and of course, A Separation. And then Mira Nair is another filmmaker that is quite aspirational for me because of the subject matters that she tackles around social justice, but specific to like the South Asian diaspora. And all her films are so nuanced, and in fact, her first film is by far my favorite, which is Salaam Bombay, and she does it with such class, So, I would say those 2, like, About Ellie and then, Salaam Bombay are 2 of my favorites, and then recently I've really gotten into European cinema, which is why I'm so excited to go to the UK. There's a film that was nominated for an Oscar 2 years ago in the international category called Close from Lucas Dont, and I love the cinematography and just, like, it was so deep. It was so deep in terms of the 2 boys, and it's not so much a queer story, but it was more about just, like, having love for one another, but then how does society perceive that? So yeah, so those were 3 of my favorite films so far.
Excellent. And if you could invite any three movie characters to your next dinner party, who would they be and why?
So I'm a huge fan of my own lead, Farhan Tahir. He is electric. He is actually doing so many different projects, and he has like no ego when it comes to these things. Like he was just in a Wes Anderson, I think was it? Yeah, he was in a big film that premiered at Venice before, and then yet he's in like a Marvel, spinoff for his own main character. And then he does a lot of film out in Pakistan, like he has his own production studio where he's constantly making films. But he's also quite spiritual. And so he's someone that I would totally bring. And then I don't know if you've seen the movie A Real Pain, Jesse Eisenberg.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Amazing. Like, that just broke me, like, when I
yeah.
watched that film, and especially the ending. And so, I don't know, like, I would wanna see if I could bring both, Kieran and Jesse Eisenberg into a conversation and just learn, because Jesse in his interviews, I've noticed, he's very open about the flaws he has, and I just love that about him, and he leans into it, into his storytelling, and it just feels so real and so grounded. And then Kieran, well-deserved win, at the Oscars last year because his performance was just immaculate, so
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are the 3 I'd probably bring.
Right. And do you have any books you could recommend that you've read recently or ones that you really enjoy? They could be fiction or nonfiction and don't have to have anything to do with movies.
A book that I've been studying a lot lately, is actually just fiction, but is 6 Days in Bombay by the, New York Times bestselling author Alka Joshi. I was very fortunate to create some scenes for her that ended up going viral, so now I'm actually adapting it into a feature screenplay with her.
Oh, nice.
It's this wonderful book about this young nurse, who kind of finds her way, within South Asian culture, especially 1937 Bombay. She finds her way where she's not someone that wants to get married as expected of her, and she travels the world. Yeah, so it's kind of like a coming of age film for an adult, and I feel like I'm still that even though I'm a mother of 2, but it's like I feel like parts of me are in that character, and I just love that journey. So I'm hoping I can do justice in creating the screenplay for it for a feature, and then, we'll see.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
And who else from the world of film should I have as a guest on the podcast?
I would say there's this wonderful filmmaker who Iram Balil, I'm butchering her last name, but Iram she did this, feature called Wakri, and we got to see it in one of the festivals that Witness was in, and it was a very, like, empowering story, that was based on a true story of a woman who spoke her mind in the social media, like, influencing world, and then she unfortunately had been killed. And in Pakistan, those are the things that, like, if we can, like, be able to overcome that in some way, I think it'd be good for all South Asians. But yeah, she would be someone that we would invite. Like, both Saif and I would love to, introduce you to her so that perhaps she can be considered, for this podcast.
Absolutely. I would love to meet her. And lastly, before we wrap up, do you have any other projects lined up that you're working on other than that script that you mentioned? And
Yeah.
also, where can people follow you and or the film on social media?
First of all, you can follow this film. We have our own Instagram account. It's called witness.shortfilm. And then me, you can follow me, Radha Mehta, Radhamehta. That's pretty much where I keep posted of all my projects. But the main thing I'm focused on is getting to my first feature that's inspired by one of my award-winning shorts from before called Dosh, which means fault in Hindi. And it centers around this beautiful couple who unfortunately has a free fall due to challenges with mental health, specifically bipolarism, and shame within our Indian culture on the fact that we just don't talk about mental health and understanding like how to navigate that together. So yeah, so I'm developing that feature at the moment, and my hope is that I can be able to shoot it before the end of next year in my hometown in Florida. And so for us, like as short filmmakers, we want to get to our first feature as quickly as we can, and the best way we can to be able to showcase our voice so that we can continue to get more features.
Absolutely. Well, Radha, thank you so much for coming on today, and thank to both you and Safe for this wonderful film. Really appreciated you sharing it with me and sharing some of the stories that went into making it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having us.
Thank you again to my guest today, Radha Mehta. Her film Witness, which she co-directed with Saif Jaan, will be making its European premiere at the 2025 Raindance Film Festival. The Oscar Project podcast is written and produced by me, Jonathan Eaterberg, with editing assistance from Joshua Eaterberg. If you want more movie coverage, check out the Oscar Project online at theoscarproject.substack.com. I'll be back on Friday with Janelle Miley to discuss the 1929 film The Divine Lady, and next Tuesday I'll have an interview with Oscar nominee Nina Gantz, director of the short film Wander to Wonder. Until then, I hope to see you at the movies.